I also copied some quotes from the book Swarm Intelligence, and I want to read some of them because they're so brilliant. So here's some quotes from the book Swarm Intelligence by James Haywood Rowling Jr. And it's really amazing. I highly recommend this book. And these are quotes, so for the rest of the genius, get the book. He says, our creativity makes us agents of change. Underdeveloped creativity renders us exploitable as agents of the status quo. So, map consciousness is creativity. That fizzling out and being captured by psychiatry is being agents of the status quo. Those are my extrapolations from what he wrote. And then he gives the example of Neo from The Matrix, and he says, in other words, Neo's creativity is first framed as a criminal offense, a transgression against social standards and expectations. His creativity is a danger to the status quo. And he also says, creativity is destabilizing, but it is also incredibly enticing. We know that feeling. It excavates the undiscovered resources embedded in the social landscape and shifts a society's center of gravity in preparation for an advance that is mutually advantageous for us all. And that's what we're doing as people who go into map consciousness, is we're harvesting new meaning, and we're attempting to share that. But we're sharing that through words and getting mad about stuff, and it's likely at the level of the gesture, just like the simple actions of the ants, creates the creative collective intelligence. And he says, Steven Pinker was suggesting that there is some next great 21st century scientific revolution on the horizon waiting to happen to us all. But the idea that there is a key scientific concept missing from our toolkits lends to a misperception, causing us to rush right past a vital understanding. And I think this quote ties into the possibility principle book. We're not understanding that we're both a separate agent and part of the whole at the same time. So each ant is a separate agent, but its coherent actions and gestures contributes to the whole intelligence, each ant together. So we're not seeing this togetherness and what we can build as a humanity. Oh, and this is where he gets to the point. He says, the point here is, what if the next cognitive revolution waiting to happen is not scientific at all, but is better characterized as a creative transformation similar to Neo's? Now, why this is profound for me is because many of us who go into map consciousness even have something that's called a so-called matrix delusion. We feel like we are Neo, we feel like we are in the matrix, we feel like we're transforming in these ways, and this book is saying maybe that's what the next transformation is, a creative transformation similar to Neo's. And this is where the leap isn't being made to, hello, this is already happening to a lot of people, and then they get swarmed into psychiatry. It's just written all over these amazing books, but not related to, this is already happening, not like, oh, there's a creative transformation similar to Neo's that might happen in the future. It's already happening, but we're not seeing it. And then they're saying, but the idea that there is a key scientific concept missing from our toolkits lends us to this misperception. The misperception is we're putting science onto this creative transformation and categorizing it, and that collapses the wave function and mutates the creative brain into being that which it is collapsed into through science. So science is collapsing creativity into a mental illness, a personal mental illness. It's assuming we are separate people that don't have an effect on the whole, that are objective, and the subjectivity of psychiatry, putting it onto people, is creating people as mental patients. So it's all this loop tied in together, and it's pretty obvious to me. And he says our creativity is a social form of intelligence, allowing us to connect, relate, join forces, and pool our resources so that we're less alone, less vulnerable, and less able. And this is what we need to do as people who go into map consciousness. Exactly what he just said. Connect, relate, join forces, pool our resources so we're not alone. So in our aloneness and our vulnerability, we don't get swarmed by psychiatry. If we're a swarm and a hive together, we have that herd immunity. We'll be immune to their memes and we'll be able to stay in a state of creativity, possibly. I don't know. We haven't done this yet. And the author says, through the force of our creativity, yada yada, we affect the surrounding world for our mutual gain. So how can we do this but make it so it's mutual gain? And often when we get some semblance of functioning back, we use that functioning to fight the system or change the system. We don't use it to create a new one and join forces with people of our neuro tribe, of the creative contagion, of the manic contagion, of the map consciousness, trans consciousness contagion. And trans consciousness is nothing but acknowledging consciousness is trans. We're both the consciousness of all and the individual consciousness, and it's all related, interconnected, interdependent, ties in. And those are lovely words, but lately I'm feeling it for real, and the words don't describe the sensation at all. And the author says, as a result of a swarm of creative activity, the effects on our common culture are incremental but consistent. A convergence of creative practices result in culture's evolution. So I feel like map consciousness is part of cultural evolution. But right now, we're transformed into a culture of mental patients. I just realized that some of the quotes didn't print out because I had my phone on airplane mode and it didn't sync with my computer. So I'll talk about the rest later, but there's a couple more. According to the author, two aspects of what he calls workbook mentality are, quote, to do as instructed, unwilling to freelance, troubleshoot, or float outside the line in search of alternate perspectives, and to accept as valid and viable what has been completed in prior exercises, unable to envision the validity or viability of what is not yet visible to anyone else. So there's a lot in that statement, but what I'm doing is searching and creating alternate perspectives and not accepting as valid and viable the psychiatric interpretation of what's happening in this transformational process. And I see that people aren't able to envision something that's not yet visible. So it's part of our job to make this visible, which is this creative, artful way of living and being. So it's not yet visible or actual or felt as a sense to others that we're really connected, not just to each other, but to the whole planet. And one other quote, he says, in summary, schools do what they are intended to do. Schools underdevelop creativity in favor of the development of citizens who are easy to categorize, easy to sort into cubicles or assembly lines, and easy to manage. 20th century behavioral psychology and the principles of scientific management converged in the classrooms across the nation to shape a system of education that penalizes unpredictability and a lack of adherence to prescribed metrics. However, creativity will not be contained. Creativity breaks free. It expands to new territories and crashes through barriers, painfully, maybe even dangerously. Can we locate creativity's social origin, and if so, how can we better understand its purposes towards the development of learning without containments? So map consciousness is learning without containment. Map consciousness is moving us back into creative living, not going back to school to learn creativity or creativity in the classroom. But since it was so programmed out of us, now we're in contact with that creative energy in daily life. Seeing creatively, creating new perceptions, seeing new meaning, as education is a process of programming and conditioning meaning into us, and then we repeat those meanings, and that's how we live as habits and a cog in the machine of society. And he also says, the impulse to preserve the stability of the known world will often squelch the emergence of the revolutionary unknowns that creativity tends to unleash. And that's what psychiatry is doing. So those are all the quotes I have now, and I think the other ones were even better. And yeah, I don't know.